तीरा वनचारि यमुनतीरा वनचारि रातमाधव कुंज विहारी जय रातमाधव कुंज विहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारि यमुना तीरा वनचारि राधा माधव कुंज विहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा शील प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा शील प्रभुपदा जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस भव्य स्तोत्र सदस्य श्रीमद ईश्वर शेष भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी शील प्रभुपाद की जय इस्कॉन संस्थापक शील प्रभुपाद की जय जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस भव्य स्तोत्र सदस्य श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय जय विष्णुपाद लघुर किशोरदास महाराज की जय जय विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद शील भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय जय विष्णुपाद वैष्णव सागर जगन्नाथ दास महाराज की जय जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास रघुनाथ गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय नमश्चर्य श्रीदास ठाकुर की जय प्रेम से गौ श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवशांत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरी गोवर्धन की जय श्री गौरांग तांजोरीश्वर भगवान की जय श्री मायापुर धाम की जय श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय कंकमयी की जय यमुनामयी की जय भक्ति देवी की जय तुलसी देवी की जय अनंतपुरी वैष्णव की जय श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय इस्कॉन वर्तमान गुरुवंदन की जय समाज भक्तुंद की जय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल ऑल glories to the Ocean, all glories to the Ocean, All glories to the Action Bhagavan. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All goes to Shri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Divim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudirhe. Nashtaprayeshu Patreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavate Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhagavati Naishtihi. Hare Krishna. Welcome you all to the Friday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are discussing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 3, text number 21. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudirhe. Papacyamanena Hridaturendriyaha Samriddhibhi Purusha Bhutti Sakshinam Akalpayesham Adhirodum Anjasa Parampadam Tveshti Yathasura Harim. Papacyamanena Hridaturendriyaha Samriddhibhi Purusha Bhutti Sakshinam Akalpayesham Adhirodum Anjasa Parampadam Tveshti Yathasura Harim. Papacyamanena Hridaturendriyaha Samriddhibhi Purusha Buddhisakshinam Akalpayesham Adhirodum Anjasa Parampadam Tveshti Yathasura Harim. Translation Sri Prabhupada Vijay. One who is conducted by false ego and thus always distressed, both mentally and sensually, cannot tolerate the opulence of self-realized persons. Being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies such persons as much as demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The real reason for the enmity between Lord Shiva and Daksha is explained here. Daksha was envious of Lord Shiva because of Shiva's high position as an incarnation of a quality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and because Shiva was directly in contact with the Super Soul and was therefore honored and given a better sitting place than he. There were many other reasons also. Daksha, being materially puffed up, could not tolerate the high position of Lord Shiva. So his anger at Lord Shiva's not standing up in his presence was only the final manifestation of his envy. Lord Shiva is always in meditation and always perceives the super soul as expressed here by the words Purusha, Purusha Buddhi Sakshina. The position of one whose intelligence is always absorbed in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very great and cannot be imitated by anyone, especially an ordinary person. When Daksha entered the arena of Yajna, Lord Shiva was in meditation and might not have seen Daksha enter. But Daksha took the opportunity to curse him because Daksha had maintained an envious attitude towards Lord Shiva for a long time. Those who are actually self-realized see every individual body as a temple of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his Paramatma feature is residing in everybody's body. When one offers respect to the body, it is not to the material body, but to the presence of the Supreme Lord. Thus, one who is always in meditation upon the Supreme Lord is always offering him obeisances. But since Daksha was not very elevated, he thought that obeisances were offered to the material body, and because Lord Shiva did not offer respect to his material body, Daksha became envious. Such persons, being unable to rise to the standard of self-realized souls like Lord Shiva, are always envious. The example given here is very suitable. Asuras, demons, or atheists are always envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They simply want to kill him. Even in this age, we find some so-called scholars commenting on Bhagavad Gita who are envious of Krishna. When Krishna says, Manmana Bhava Mad Bhaktaha, in Bhagavad Gita 1865, always think of me, become my devotee and surrender unto me. The so-called scholars comment that this is not to Krishna that we have to surrender, that is envy. The asuras or atheists, the demons, without reasons or cause, are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, instead of offering respect to self-realized persons, foolish men who cannot approach the highest standard of self-realization are always envious, although there is no reason. Sri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Hena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamaki Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Udamadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sakrajatam Sarganar Gunatanvitam Tam Jeevam Sadvaikam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sargan Lalita Sri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpade Bhupesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Saptakanchana Gaurangi Jate Bundavaneshwari Vishmanushite Pranamami Haripriye Mancha Kalpataru Vishak Vasandev Patitanam Pavnebhu Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavranda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Moham Karoti Vachalam Pangam Nande Digam Yatrupada Mahamande Shri Gurum Dhanatma Paramadhamadam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hare Krishna. Welcome to this Friday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. To just recollect what has happened so far, Daksha, one of the Pradapatis, had organized a very big sacrifice. And all the demigods, all the rishis, great saintly personalities, all were invited. So as soon as Daksha entered, everyone got up excepting Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. Lord Brahma was Daksha's father himself, so he was not upset much with Lord Brahma. But he was upset with Lord Shiva not getting up because, as explained before, Daksha was a materialist and he could not estimate the position of Lord Shiva as a great Vaishnava. And thereafter, Daksha becomes angry. Daksha also has got many reasons to be upset with Lord Shiva because Brahma asked Daksha to marry his daughter Sati. And so he handed over Sati to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva was actually externally looking as if he was a very renounced person with very minimal dress and having ashes on his body, wearing the garland of skulls, etc. Whereas Daksha was a hardcore materialist who was looking very, very opulent. So these are two contrasting personalities. So when Lord Shiva did not get up, Daksha was feeling insulted and he cursed Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva's followers like Nandi and all who were present there, they got upset on Daksha cursing Lord Shiva. So they counter-cursed and the followers there was a cursing and counter-cursing going on between Daksha's followers and Lord Shiva's followers. Now there is another sacrifice that is being organized by Daksha. And this time he invited everybody excepting Lord Shiva and his good wife, that is his daughter Daksha. So Sati, his Lord Shiva's wife, gives many reasons as to why she should not go to the sacrifice, though she has not been invited, because many of her sisters, her friends, relatives, she gives so many reasons as to why she should go. And Lord Shiva gives many reasons as to why she should not go. So in this particular sloka, just before this, I'll just touch on the previous sloka also. Lord Shiva tells that she will not be honored at her house because she happens to be his wife, that is Shiva's wife, and she feels very, very sorry for having gone there. In this verse, Lord Shiva is telling her, one who is conducted by false ego, one who is always agitated by the false ego, becomes distressed both mentally as well as sensually, and such person cannot tolerate the opulence of self-realized persons. So being unable to rise to the standard of self-realization, he envies such persons, that is, he envies self-realized persons, just as the demons envy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here, Lord Shiva mentions about the view of Daksha as a materialist. Now, Lord Shiva is a highly self-realized person, and Daksha is a hardcore materialist. There's a total contrast in terms of the personality characteristics of both of them. And we will see some of these and as to why Daksha becomes agitated both mentally and sensually. So generally we see that in today, people are generally driven by their false ego. Right from the time a child is born to the time a child goes to the school, where there is a lot of competition. There is always an aim for each and everyone to come first, second, third, like that. Whereas there is only one position. Couple of them might take one position also, but not everybody. The same thing continues when one goes to college. Same competition is there. And further, as one takes up a job or a profession, the same competition exists. So what happens is people are driven by their false ego. And when they are driven by their false ego, they lose their senses and their understanding in many occasions. And this is one such occasion where Daksha failed to understand the position of Lord Shiva. So this contrasting qualities lead sometimes the materialists to be envious of self-realized personalities. Now the Lord himself tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita Bhagavad Gita chapter 5, text 12, he says the steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the results of all the activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. So here a difference between a Krishna conscious person and a materialist is described here. A Krishna conscious person always offers the results of all his activities to Supreme Lord Krishna. So he is always at peace. As the Lord says, Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasa, Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. The Lord is the enjoyer of all the fruits of all the activities. Whereas a materialist person, he is greedy to possess the fruits of his activities, and therefore he becomes bound by entangling himself by the results of these activities in this material world. Because in the material world, any activity that one performs is bound by its reactions, good, bad, positive, negative, etc. So such people who have taken to connected to Krishna consciousness and who offer the activities are called liberated, and they are not anxious of what happens to the results of their work. But a hardcore materialist person, because he doesn't have knowledge of the absolute truth, he is in the conception of duality. So they always envy demoniac people who are devotees of the Lord. And similarly, in fact, there is a nice example we see. Now, Daksha is a Prajapati. Being a hardcore materialist, he believes in karmakanda activities in the Vedas. In the Vedas, there are a lot of activities described, which are classified into three: karmakanda, jnanakanda, and upasanakanda. So this karmakanda section of the activities in the Vedas, they give details about what happens if one does this, one can go to this planet, sun planet. Why if one does this ritual, he goes to moon planet. If one does this, he goes to the planet of Venus. Like that, so many karmakanda activities are mentioned, which we see people even today in general follow. If you see a Brahmana priest, he will advise you, you must do this ritual by which you can attain eternal peace in sun, moon. They will describe so much in a flowery language that an ordinary person who is not aware of the reality, he gets carried away by these languages and they go for these rituals. Lord Shiva was in fact a great Vaishnava, one of the great devotees of the Lord. And he lives in a very non-opulent environment, which Daksha could not understand as to why it is so. Also, Daksha is the father-in-law of Lord Shiva. So he considers Lord Shiva always to be junior to him. And he doesn't understand Lord Shiva's self-realized personality. A Vaishnava does not identify himself from a materialistic background. Generally, an outsider, a materialist, considers himself that he is in an ideal situation, the association of materialists who are dressed like very nicely in opulent dress. For example, an office goer might look at wearing a tie, coat, nice hairstyle, and so forth. Whereas a Vaishnava now wears simple dresses like dhoti, kurta, and shaved hair and clean shaven, etc. Lord Shiva was having his eyes unmatted, and he always used to have ashes on his body and wearing skulls, garland of skulls, etc. Now, Daksha also looked at his daughter Sati as very, very beautiful, whereas he looked at Lord Shiva as very, very ugly. But he had no option because Lord Brahma had asked him to hand over Sati in marriage to Lord Shiva. So whenever there is a gathering of these materialistic people, we will find that only such type of people, materialistic people, gather. And whenever uh, there is a gathering of spiritualists, you will find spiritualists gathering of only spiritualists. And the qualities of both of them are different. But if there is a gathering of both, then there is there are complexities because the characteristics are different. For example, in a materialistic society, a husband might consider his wife to be very, very beautiful. So he goes with his wife, she wears opulent dresses, opulent jewelry, etc. And they generally want to exhibit this jewelry. So this is a general normal characteristic we say even today. So, but what happens is that a spiritualist understands that though husband looks at his wife as very attractive, the wife becomes the center of attraction for all the other men. And that becomes a source of uh, rather a path for future adultery and so many things. If someone has a lot of wealth and he exhibits wealth, his opulence in a gathering of such materialists, immediately what happens is there are always people who try to extract money from such people. Today, which is full, the society is full of such extremists. There are people who even resort to murder, to commit any abominable, sinful activity, also commit crimes, so as to extract the opulence of the wealth of others. And the society is driven today by things like Facebook and Instagram, and so many things are there, which you have, like so many likes, so many dislikes. It's a common phrase these days. So Daksha was always being in the lower modes of passion and ignorance. He was always bound by his false ego. In the process, he was always envious of Lord Shiva. Now, Lord Shiva, on the other hand, was being renounced. He had no material ambition, and he was always absorbed in meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And actually, Lord Shiva's position is very close to the Supreme Personality. Though he is not Supreme Lord, he is very close, as Lord Brahma himself prays in Brahma Samhita 545. Kshiram yata dadi vikara vishesha yogat sanjayate nahi tata pradigasti hetu yasham budam abhitata samapaiti karyat govindamali purusham tamaham bhajami. Lord Brahma says, just as milk is transformed into curd by the action of acids, but yet the effect curd is neither the same as nor different from its cause, that is milk. So I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, of whom the state of Shambhu is a transformation for the performance of the work of destruction. So we will understand one point from here. In one aspect, Lord Shiva is very close to Lord Govinda, but at the same time, he is not Govinda. The example is given, just as milk is transformed into curd. They both are products of milk, but curd is not milk. Similarly, uh, curd is a transformation of milk. So similarly, Lord Shiva is a transformation of Govinda. That means the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And Lord Shiva is in charge of the mode of ignorance. That means mostly his followers are in the mode of ignorance. Now, at the same time, Lord Shiva, being a great devotee of the Lord, he is not indebted to anybody. What to talk about the materialist is like Daksha. There is a quote in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Narad Muni gives a lot of instructions to Vasudeva, father of Lord Krishna. And one of them he says, O king, one who has given up all material duties and has taken full shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, who offers shelter to all, is not indebted to the demigods, great sages, ordinary living beings, relatives, friends, mankind, or even one's forefathers who have passed away. Since all such classes of living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, one who has surrendered to the Lord's service has no need to serve such persons separately. We'll understand a little bit from this verse. Now, one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Lord Mukunda, Mukunda himself offers shelters to everybody, but one who has taken shelter of Lord Mukunda, he is not indebted to any demigods, any sages, any relatives, friends, not to one's forefathers, not to anyone of the living entities in this material world. Though everybody is a part and parcel, but one who has surrendered to the Lord's service has no need to serve any individual separately. So Lord Shiva is a surrendered soul like that to the Supreme Lord. But still, though he is associated with one of the modes of material nature, he is not as on the transcendental platform like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is a small difference. So a materialist always looks at a spiritualist on a lower platform and always becomes envious of him, which ultimately leads him to fault finding. And vice versa, a spiritualist always looks at a materialist in a different platform. And here we see here we see that Daksha, he feels Lord Shiva has not offered his respects to him by not getting up. Now, Lord Shiva is always in meditation on the Supreme Lord Vasudeva. That is also mentioned here. So when he is meditating on the Supreme Lord Vasudeva, it is as good as he is offering respects to all the living entities, because the Lord is seated in the heart of everyone as the Paramatma. So when the Lord Shiva is meditating on the Supreme Lord, he is also meditating on the Supreme Lord who is seated as Paramatma in Daksha's heart, which Daksha could not understand. So this is a misunderstanding that Daksha had. And he became envious and he started condemning Lord Shiva. Now, there is another verse in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna tells Arjuna in 269, what is night for all beings is a time of awakening for the self-control. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for introspective sage, which is very true. That means those who are self-controlled, when it is night for them, it is daytime for the materialist. And when it is nighttime for the spiritualist, it is daytime for the materialist, and vice versa. And we'll see this, that many times the self-realized personalities, they wake up in the morning at 3:30, 4, to wake up for Mangalarti and attend for sadhana, devotional service to the Lord, etc. That is the time normally a materialist goes to sleep. They go to bed at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and get up at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. So this way there is always a contrast between materialist and spiritualist. This is also mentioned in Bhagavad Gita by Lord Krishna to Arjuna. Now Daksha was already materially very, very puffed up, and he could not understand the position of Lord Shiva. So he was angry at Lord Shiva. Now Lord Shiva is being absorbed in meditation in the Supreme Lord. He is not disturbed by external circumstances. So on that first sacrifice which was organized by Daksha, Lord Shiva did not even see Daksha having entered the arena of the yajna. So Daksha became upset and became envious, and finally it resulted into fault finding. Now this fault finding reached to such an extent that it led to curses and counter curses. And now again he is conducting a ceremony in which he has not invited Lord Shiva or his daughter Sati. Sati wants to go, but Lord Shiva forbids her, saying these are the reasons, but you don't go. Now Lord Shiva, being a great Vaishnava, he looks at everyone on an equal platform. He does not develop a hatred for Daksha as much as Daksha develops for Lord Shiva. So there is another quote in Bhagavad Gita where the Lord says, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, Brahmane Gavihastini, Suni Chaiva Suphakecha, Pandita Sama Darshanaha. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and a gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. So from here we should understand though Daksha was finding fault with Lord Shiva was actually meditating on the Lord situated in the heart of, as Paramatma, in the heart of Daksha. So Shiva did not find a difference between Daksha and anybody else, whereas Daksha was finding the difference, finding fault with Lord Shiva. So he was thinking that Shiva has not offered obeisances to my material body, but one does not have to, great personality like Lord Shiva need not offer obeisances to a material body. When he is in meditation on the Supreme Lord, he has already offered his obeisances to the super soul situated within his heart. So similarly, there is a very nice quote given in Upadeshamrita as to how a devotee should not be looked at from a materialistic point of view. The translation says, the translation for the sloka says, being situated in his original Krishna conscious position, a pure devotee does not identify with the body. Such a devotee should not be seen from the materialistic point of view. That means, thus, one who is situated on the spiritual platform should not be looked at from a materialistic point of view. Indeed, one should overlook a devotee having a body born in a low family, a body with a bad complexion, a deformed body, or a diseased or infirm body. According to ordinary vision, such imperfections may seem prominent in the body of a pure devotee, but despite such seeming defects, the body of a pure devotee cannot be polluted. So some way that materialistic people look at a devotee, maybe, oh, he's born from a low family, he's not from a Brahmana family, he's got a dark complexion, or he doesn't have hairs, he's got a bald head. These are not the views that a materialistic should be looking at from at a spiritualist. The devotee should not be looked at from a material point of view at all. It is exactly like the water of the Ganges, where sometimes during the rainy season are full of bubbles, foam, and mud. The Ganges waters do not become polluted. Those who are advanced in spiritual understanding will bathe in the Ganges without considering the condition of water. So pure devotees of the Lord, they always bathe in the Ganges water, even if the Ganges water is dirty. But a materialistic person should not look at one who is taking bath in the Ganges, oh, he's taking bath in a dirty water. No, devotee is always pure, and he's always, uh, uh, his activities are pure. There is another example in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where we will find example of Gandhari. It is mentioned that Gandhari was a very chaste lady, and she was a daughter of a great king. And she was also a great devotee of Lord Shiva. Like I mentioned, Lord Shiva has got many followers who are situated mostly in the mode of ignorance. Now, Gandhari was a very chaste lady, and she was worshipped by many also. She had many followers among the Hindus also. And by the benediction, by her austerities, she pleased Lord Shiva. And by his benediction, she got 100 sons through Dhritarashtra. Now, she was chaste because uh, from her birth itself, she was known to be a very chaste lady. And she was married to Dhritarashtra. And the moment she knew that she was marrying a person who was blind, she decided to follow her husband. And she also became voluntarily blind. She tied up her eyes with cloth so that she cannot see. This is how she followed her husband right through her life, from the time of her marriage till she left her body. But then what happened was, at point of time, generally they said that women have some qualities, and Gandhari was not an exception to that. And she had a cunning brother, elder brother in the name of Shakuni. So despite all the good qualities she had the frailties of a woman. And both she and Kunti Devi, both were pregnant at the same time. But as soon as Kunti Devi gave birth to a male child, immediately Gandhari became very envious of her. And she became very angry, and she started blowing her own abdomen. As a result, she gave birth to a lump of flesh. But since she was a devotee of Yasadeva, by his instruction, the lump was divided into 100 parts. and each part gradually became one male child. Thus, her ambition to have 100 twins was fulfilled, and she began to nourish all the children according to her exalted position. But unfortunately, as we all know, they all became demoniac in nature. And finally, we see that in Mahabharata, all her children were all killed in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So this is how, what happens is that even if one is chaste, if one gets contaminated by the lower modes of material nature, they become envious and they don't understand the transcendental situation of the other person. So Gandhari became envious of Kunti, was also a very great devotee of the Supreme Lord. So Kunti gave birth to the Pandavas, and Gandhari gave birth to the Kauravas, who became demons. And the Pandavas were great devotees of the Lord. And finally, we see at the battlefield of Kurukshetra how the Pandavas became victorious and the Kauravas lost all the battlefield. On all of her 100 children were killed in the battlefield. So this is how a materialist looks at a spiritualist, and sometimes he gets drawn into contrasting situations, which thereby leads him to start becoming envious, and that enviousness leads him to find faults. And finally, when he keeps finding fault, and as you know, one of the offenses unto a Vaishnava, or even one of the offenses for chanting the holy name of the Lord, is to find fault on one who is performing devotional service to the Lord. So nobody is perfect in this material world. Lord Shiva, though he was being a great Vaishnava, he was associated with the mode of ignorance, and his followers were also of the mode of ignorance. That is why we find Lord Shiva mostly seated in the crematorium, having his body full of ashes, and wearing a deer skin, and wearing a skull of garlands, etc. But then he was a great devotee of the Lord, which Daksha could not estimate, so he underestimated. So therefore, it is mentioned that those who are conducted by false ego, that means Daksha was always conducted by his false ego, being a very great materialist, and he was always distressed both mentally and sensually. So one who is always driven by his false ego, what is this false ego? False ego is, I am this body, and all that I see is mine. So this I, me, mine is a popular, very familiar identification of one's false ego. And when one is identifying himself with his false ego, material world being a place of dualities. Dualities means happiness and distress, good and bad. One has to go through all of these. In fact, generally in the material world, one goes through only distress. And when one does not see a distress, that is what one thinks to be in the mode of happiness. Whereas my happiness does not exist in this material world, as the Lord himself says, Dukkalayam Ashashvatam, that this material world is a place of distress. So Daksha could not understand, being situated in the mode of in the dualities of happiness and distress, could not understand the position of Lord Shiva, and he could not understand the opulence of a self-realized soul like Lord Shiva. So, being a materialist, he looked at Lord Shiva as very poor, as very dirty, very ugly, which was not the case with Shiva. Shiva was deep in meditation, and always he delivers. He's very, very compassionate in nature. Being a Vaishnava, Lord Shiva is very compassionate in nature, which Daksha was not. So these are the two contradicting qualities of a spiritualist and a transcendentalist. And because of which Daksha became envious, just as it is mentioned in the last paragraph of this purport, demons become envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We see that always whenever Lord Krishna is there, during his presence also many demons appear, like Arishtasura, Bakasura, Ravanasura, so forth. So many demons appeared. They all wanted to kill Lord Krishna. So here Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport that even today there are many so-called demons who want to kill Lord Krishna, by saying that Lord Krishna does not exist at all. Whereas Lord Krishna himself says in Bhagavad Gita, which Srila Prabhupada mentions in 1865, Manmana Bhavad Mad Bhakta, always think of me, become my devotee, and surrender unto me. This is the way Lord is instructing Arjuna. But the so-called scholars who exhibit themselves to be scholars, these are the materialistic people who exhibit themselves to be great devotees of the Lord, but they don't know what is devotional service. But they write commentary on Bhagavad Gita, and then they say that they should not surrender to Krishna because Krishna is not there. So this is also from the last sloka of Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord says, surrender and sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tam sarva papebhyo mokshayasya masachara. The Lord says, surrender unto me, at least to Lord Krishna. But the so-called scholars of Bhagavad Gita, who are not into devotional service, when they write a commentary, they say that you should not surrender to Krishna because Krishna does not exist. He's a mortal living being like any other living entity. And some say that one should surrender to the impersonal feature of the Lord. This is also very common. That when impersonalists write commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, they write about the impersonal worship of the impersonal form of the Lord. Whereas if you see Srila Prabhupada's commentary, he clearly mentioned that impersonal Brahman is also one of the aspects of the complete personality of Godhead. So impersonalists write that one should worship or one should respect or surrender to the impersonal form of the Lord, which is also wrong. So like this, there are many so-called scholars who try to kill the Supreme Personality of God's personality even today. So Srila Prabhupada is giving an example how such materialists become envious. It is out of their envious attitude to the Lord that they write such commentaries. So these envious people, they try to find fault with the Supreme Lord also, without knowing that the Lord is the origin of everyone, including them. That is what is called envy. And these so-called atheists or demons, being supreme envious, they start finding fault with the Supreme Lord. And just like that, the materialistic person are always in the course of finding fault with the spiritualists or the transcendentalists without any reason. The materialists, if you see, we will find always in gatherings where they discuss activities of a hardcore materialist. Whereas in the spiritual gathering, when devotees gather, they always discuss Krishna Katha. They glorify the Lord and they always discuss about the glories of the Lord. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, text 9, Machitta Madgata Prana Bodhayantaha Parasparam Kathayantas Chamam Nityam Tushyanti Cha Ramanti Cha. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are always devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So when devotees gather, they always think about the Lord. They always engage in the service of the Lord, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from enlightening one another by discussing about the Supreme Lord only. So here, and the same thing goes with materialist people. When hardcore materialists gather, they always discuss about politics, they discuss about economics, sociology, so many, they discuss about science, everything, but they don't discuss about the Supreme Lord. So in such gatherings, such gatherings become a source of envy towards the transcendentalists, which always leads to fault finding of such devotees of the Lord, which is a very great offense. And thereby, such people, they are dragged down to hellish conditions after that birth. So another example given is that about the Brahma Vimohan Lila. Though Lord Brahma is a great devotee of the Lord, still at some point of time, he came to a state that he wanted to test, is this boy who is having lunch with all his cowherd boys, is he the Supreme Personality of Godhead? So Lord Brahma stole the calves and cowherd boys when they were all gathering to have lunch. And when Krishna went out to look for the lost calves, so Brahma came and stole the calves and cowherd boys. And after some time, he put them into one place and he came to see what is happening, whether Krishna has come back or not. To his surprise, he found the same cowherd boys, the same calves, everyone in the same place. He went back to the same place where he had stolen and hidden the cowherd boys and calves. And they were also there. And again, he came back to see that they were again here also. So Lord Krishna manifested his opulence to Lord Brahma to show that he is not a normal living entity. Whereas Lord Brahma wanted to test the capability of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whether this small boy can he be the Supreme Lord. So sometimes even great devotees of the Lord are driven to such situations. These are examples for us to understand that even by practicing devotion service, one should not consider himself to be a very great devotee of the Lord. Otherwise, one could be driven to situations like Lord Brahma. And then ultimately one can become envious of the Lord, which can lead to fault finding of the Lord himself. So Daksha became envious of Shiva, and he was considering that why he was not offering obeisances unto me. He did not understand that Shiva was already offering obeisances to the Paramatma situated in Daksha's heart. And being a hardcore materialist, Daksha did not understand that Lord was situated in his heart as the Paramatma feature. And it so happened that Daksha and Brahma are both sons of Lord, and Shiva is born from Lord Brahma. So in every case, Daksha looked at Shiva from an inferior point of view, whereas Shiva from every aspect was much higher than Daksha, though Daksha was on a fatherly status and Shiva was on a son or son-in-law status. So this is how many times when spiritualists gather, they should not identify one another as senior or junior, or try to look at qualities of a Vaishnava from a materialistic point of view. Some might be very junior, but then they may be elevated Vaishnavas, and some may be very senior, but they might not have been elevated. One should not look at these qualities of a Vaishnava from a materialistic point of view in terms of their years of service or their external appearances and so forth. If one resorts to that, then one can be driven to false ego, which can lead to envy and which can lead to fault finding. So this is what happened to Daksha. And as we see in the future slokas, Sati did not adhere or heed to the instructions given by Lord Shiva, and she had to face some very unfavorable circumstances. So with this, I conclude the class for the day. If any of you have any questions, any comments on today's session, they can ask me.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you, Dandavat. Prabhuji, you mentioned one sloka. If we surrender to Krishna, we are not indebted to anyone. What is the
Yes.
sloka number? Sloka number
11,541, if I'm not mistaken. One second. Yes, 11,541.
Thank you,
Srimad
Prabhuji.
Bhagavatam, 11,541.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Dandavat.
Welcome. Hare Krishna.
Very interesting session.
Anybody else got any other questions, comments? If not, can I take the class as concluded? Hare Krishna. So I take the class as concluded. Thank you all very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.